Welcome to PhillyCocoa Presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 16. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. We are your virtual guide through this isekai journey. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are PhillyCocoa, a Philadelphia-based CoocaHeads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. PhillyCocoa's true desire is to take you higher on your developer journey.
Wow.
Whew. All right.
Which isekai are we in? One of the trashy ones?
I don't know.
Other kind?
Like the one, hopefully
right.
hopefully the one that were overpowered with like a very critical cheat.
That's right. That's the only kind I watched.
And our guest is like, "What the hell are we talking about?" But don't worry about it. It's just horrible anime reference.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to have Mohammad Faani on our podcast today. Welcome, Mohammad. Mohammad is an iOS developer at Comcast, or is it Xfinity now?
Xfinity, yes.
Xfinity, well, I'm sorry. Now Xfinity. So welcome, Mohammad. Could you give us a brief overview of what you do at Comcast or Xfinity?
Sure. My name is Mohammad, and Mohammad Faani, and I've been at Comcast for about 5 years now, and I've done a little bit of work for them as a engineer for their enterprise app. It's the app that technicians use. If you're a technician and you need to like find out what's your work order, as in like, where should I go next? Is this a like repair? Is this like a troubleshooting? Is this like a new install? Or is this like a change of service? Or is there like a customer moving? All of that, and like the wrap up, the notes, all of that, like getting like the health of different devices at a home. That was done with this app. Later on, I moved into working for the Xfinity app. The Xfinity app is the mobile app where you have like your cameras, your door locks, your sensors, your lights, and you get push notifications for like any new notification of images or door locks that happens. It's like an IoT based app. I've worked for that app. I've been there for like 3 years now. Really enjoying it, and I feel like that's helped me grow as an engineer in my career. That's what I've been doing for the past few years at Comcast.
So, can I ask, like, before iOS development, what type of tech stack were you working in?
Before that, so a bit about myself, like something that I know a lot of people are like, we always want to know, like, if I meet somebody new, I'm like, I want to know about that person, their background personally, where they're from, like, which state did they grow up, where they come from. For me personally, I'm originally from Iran or Iran, and I came here in the 90s. I went a bit of back and forth. Like we came here for my father. He was like doing his master's and PhD in Maryland, and that's where I like was living before coming to Philly and Comcast. I was just doing like just random stuff, random work. And my background itself is something in between like a major of an industrial engineering degree and with a minor of like railway engineering. It's a really weird thing.
I didn't think that was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, but wow. Okay.
It's like more or less of like optimizing the timetable of like the schedule of that a train should take, and like where it should stop, how you should like load the cars in what order. And then like for your crew, like this crew needs to be at this location at this time. It was like serious tons of optimization and stuff. So that was like something that I was working on, but I really didn't like that. So, and I always had like these lots of ideas of like working in the world of like tech and apps and web and stuff. And I did a bunch of courses on like code.org and Code Academy, and like I tried some stuff. I went on Stack Overflow, and like I was asking like some questions, and like I got like nuked by like, this is a terrible question. This is duplicate question. Your
no.
question is like low quality.
you encountered
no.
the awfulness of Stack Overflow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wow.
I did.
Oh man, why can't we have like the Bob Ross of programming? Well, okay, Paul Hudson counts.
We're going to go into a whole rant
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Stack
okay,
Overflow,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we've all experienced it.
All right,
Yeah.
And so like I put away everything I was working on as a web engineer, like in the world of web development, and it after like 2 years, the work that I was doing like as a side for my own, like it was just like self-employed kind of work. It didn't go so well, and I found myself this mentor and some other groups of iOS engineers, like people that wanted to become iOS engineers, and I just started working with them. I was like going through stuff, and I started with Objective C, and ultimately, like I did some interviews. I was able to land like my first job, and it was good. With the power of Stack Overflow, I had like I got to learn a lot of other stuff. I was like more structured in terms of like asking questions. I recall the very first moment that I asked a question, and I was like getting 3 answers from like people that their total sum of reputation was like about like 500,000. I was like, wow. And I got these answers in like an hour. I was like, wow, this forum is amazing.
Yeah, when they're not smacking you down.
Yes.
Can be useful.
I actually like changed my ID to like a new person. I started like from new, fresh. Yeah, because
do they check your like question history? Like Reddit will do that thing where like if you post something that's semi-controversial, they might go look at your post history to like check if you're like, okay, is this guy like
this was a
weird
brand new
for some
account,
reason?
like new email, everything. So wasn't able, that could have not happened.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then a little bit about like some other background about me. Like I recall when I was doing this whole thing of like Stack Overflow and like getting mentorship and all that, I went to a meetup in DC. It was the Capital One meetup that they have, and it was amazing. Like the first time that I was in a meetup among like other real iOS engineers, I felt like I was in heaven. Like they were like free parking in Capital One. I was like, wow, free food. I was like, wow, free conference, and like there's no cost for like training. Wow. And I still remember like the person was talking about like how to use like the view debugger hierarchy, and somebody in like I don't know how the discussion went to some point, and they were like git diff, and I was like, git diff, okay. Like everything was like so shiny and cool for me. I like that. I loved that really. And then I came to Philly, and then I found a much better, cooler meetup, CoocaHeads.
That's right.
Yeah. No, just kidding.
And it was in the
Capital One's
Apple
cool.
Store.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and beyond that, like I got to join on your the Slack that you have, and that was like a major level up for me. And I was like, I joined and I was like, okay, I don't know what Slack really is, and then I joined and I saw like code help. I was like, really? Such a thing exists? That's not illegal? So like I started like asking questions and questions and questions. Like you guys all remember, like I was nonstop asking questions from everybody in the channel, and that just helped me grow further. And then there was like this book club, which like I really, it's sad for me, like we haven't like been doing that recently. But the book club with Michael, like I did a book club with we started with Paul Hudson's book. It was
Right.
Swift Pro or something. We did that book, and then we did a book on like Swift server side. We did a book, and that was really helpful because I learned some stuff about servers and more about Swift itself. We did a book on gaming, like scene kits and sprite kit. That was also cool and helpful. And another book that we did was on code challenges. That was also interesting. So like the book club, I have like a lot of good memories. I've met a lot of cool people in doing that. So yeah, those are some of like a little bit of my background and now how I relate and connect to like Philly CocoaHeads. Yeah.
We should bring book back club back, but it's hard because you need a volunteer for that, and it's a big investment of time. But it's there are a lot of good books out right now that's worthy of that opportunity. I know Ray Winderlich has. We just downloaded a book called like Mac OS development.
Oh, really? Okay.
That I really could probably use some guidance because there's in PhillyCocoa there are a lot of people who existed prior, who have been in PhillyCocoa prior to the iOS gold rush days. It was Mike Zornick and a lot of these people were in the Mac development group, and that's kind of how it started. PhillyCocoa started as a Mac development.
Then all the iOS kids came in, took it over. That's right,
those mangy kids. but it was cool because it was just like this was during the sort of like absurd pseudo skeuomorphic days of Mac development where you had like the toast burning app where like you were DVD burning and it would actually like the metaphor was like a toaster burning as it was like burning the DVD. What's your general feeling about unit testing in general? Because I have my own problematic feelings, harsh relationship with unit testing. I need somebody to bring me down that ledge, and I feel like you would be the person to do that for me.
Personally, for me, it gives structure to your code. Definitely, mm-hmm. It gives modularity to your code. Like everybody has to follow in a similar way of writing your test because your code, because your tests are going to be you want your test to be similar, and oftentimes like I don't know how to test this, but I've seen this person wrote their test this way, so let me go and see how they've wrote their actual code. So in that sense, it brings modularity, and a lot of times for me, testing is just like dependency injection, and that seems easy. The only part that I don't like is like when you try to do like UI testing and unit testing within unit testing, that doesn't seem reasonable. Or like you're always just trying to target a certain percentage without like having real benefits. As in like, let me just test if this string is correct. That is okay to test, but I feel like it's just often a waste of time. It's better to have it's hard to test if your code is following solid principles, in the sense that this class has this single responsibility. It's hard to have a test for that. It's easier for me to test bad code that does exactly what I expect, and it doesn't exactly always have value for us as engineers. I would rather make sure that I have a decent, well-written code that does one thing only, and then focus on testing the heart, the essence of the logic around that, rather than just testing like if clicking on this button goes to the next screen. I'd rather test if going from this state, as in not void of any UI, sets the state correct. That's all I'd rather test.
Right. So you're not trying to get literally 100% code coverage in your unit tests, and you're making choices what to focus on, which I think is how anyone really should be doing it. But it's like where those boundaries are that is the question. Like for me, I think it's usually if I'm doing like a bunch of unit tests, it's I'm not going to try to test like UI kit stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'm just going to assume that works, even if we know it doesn't always. But you got to pick a boundary. So I'm going to test my stuff, and like you, I'm more about what is the really important thing I'm trying to test here, and how robust do I need this testing to be? And then sometimes I abuse unit tests to create integration tests because it's a useful way to build them. Because like sometimes, like you were saying, I need to connect to a real system in order to do the test. So it doesn't really make sense to try to mock it, a whole lot. So I'll just build it with the unit testing framework just because it's easy to like run it. Then that's all.
Yeah, I was thinking like that's sort of my sort of struggle is like I get the value, right? Like on paper, it just everything about it makes sense to me, right? And I've certainly done my share of unit tests where I've said, okay, like this forced me to fix my code that was inherently bad because the test had failed. But a lot of times, maybe like if I'm spending 50% of my development time struggling to get this test to work right, or basically get my code to get the test to make it work right, and then subsequently, okay, great, now every time I run these tests, these are testing for that point of failure. But then we do a radical change to the entire UI or the entire flow. Was that time spent really worth it? Because design decides, okay, let's just like completely like change this entire app functionality.
That never happens. Product never decides to change their UI though.
It never happens.
Is that sarcasm? I said.
Get the sarcasm flag. The UI is not one of the places that I tend to do unit tests. Every time I've tried to do automated testing of some sort with user interface, it's been disastrous because, the UI changes, for some reason or another, and it breaks. However, the way I think about unit testing, Cotro, is if I'm creating these tests not for me but for future Steve, and every time I encounter some of my tests that I forgot that I wrote, I thank past Steve for it. And every time I don't have any tests and I really wish I did, I curse past Steve. So it's like do future Kotaro a favor and write some tests sometimes. Just because if you think you're going to need it in the future. So especially if it's a long-lived product, or whenever I do an integration between systems, that's when for sure I'm doing tests. I'm like, I need these tests. I need to be able to hit a button, run these, see if stuff's broken, see what changed. And I do test around the data format. So if I'm converting from one data structure to another, like from APIs, I'll do that. And then I'll have some integration tests that actually try to connect to it. And those are a little more fragile, of course. Yeah. But that's really helpful because then, if you haven't changed anything and suddenly your integration's broken, I've had this, and I've been able to run the tests, and then I'll be able to pinpoint where the problem was. I was like, oh, they changed like something in the JSON or whatever. So that's where I think it's most useful. But I'm not religious about unit testing, and I have known, or I've been at like conferences. It was a long time ago, I guess, but it was at conferences where it was kind of like it felt like a religion. You know what I mean? Like some people are just like 100% or no go, 100% coverage.
What about you, Mohammed? If you were to build an app, just your own big, world-changing app, or maybe not that bad, your side project app, how much testing would you add to how much unit tests would you add to
own?
That? Yeah,
I mean,
just your own.
Test it
your
in
own
prod,
side project app.
Test it in prod.
AKA zero code coverage.
No, I'm being serious. I mean, if it's a solo one team like effort, I don't have time to put in work on the unit test. If maybe like for something that is like crazy hard, like I'm not so sure if my code is right, I'll write the unit test to like validate if it works as I expect. Otherwise, for the most part, like I'm just going to go through this screen, that screen. The user will tell me, I'll figure it out. Somebody.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that's can be very reasonable. I mean, as I said, I write tests. I think about my future self. But especially if you're just building like a one-off project or something, or I mean, I think it depends on what your end goal is, and how complicated it is. As I said, certain things I'll do tests for. Certain things, as I said, I'll just like test the screen, see if it works, and then move on because it's just not worth the extra effort.
Right. So, Mohammed, since I've known you, since you've come to PhillyCocoa, the times that you've come, and the time that you've spent in our Slack group, you do ask a lot of questions, which I must reinforce is a very good thing. Like that's one of the things I always strongly encourage any of our new members to do. Certainly I've found a lot of the successful iOS developers who've come through here ask zillions of questions. It's a great sign when you do. And so I am kind of curious because now you have created a blog called TRL.
TIL.
TIL. Sorry, I'm Japanese, so L's don't quite function very well. TIL or L with Mohammed. I grew up in Philly. I should be able to do this.
Today I learned.
Today I learned. Thank you. Today I learned with Mohammed. And it's a wonderful tech blog, mostly around Apple development, for lack of a better word. So conversations about Xcode, some with Git, some with Swift. And I'm sort of curious. I found you to be a very curious person, and you always had a tendency to dive really deep into a topic. So kind of getting back to when you used to come to PhillyCocoa, you did a wonderful presentation. I believe it was about threading. If I remember,
Memory management.
What's that?
Memory management.
Memory management. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And you had this really deep and like, sort of like, it was almost like your thought process done in the presentation of like you trying to understand this concept, which I thought was really fun. And I think this blog is sort of an extension of that. So I guess, can you go into sort of like your reasoning behind why you came up with this blog, and after that kind of describe what goes into the thought process of your topics in general?
Definitely. So that's really like why I started the blog. I'm very active on Stack Overflow, or better to say, I've been very active. I'm less active because of my blog now. And the thing was, I felt there was not, to some extent, there was not enough freedom with Stack Overflow. There was the structure, like as in, you always have to, there should be a question and there should be an answer. Beyond that, you cannot go deep, like go do a deep dive on something that you want. Just to give you an example, I recently did a while back, I did a post on how to read Git documentation. And I had that exact question asked on Stack Overflow, and it was categorized as, this question is just too broad. So one reason was just the freedom. I can write about anything. And to just give you another example, I wrote about like my 401k and my RSUs and employee stock purchase plans, because that was something that I also struggled for a while. And I thought if I post about it, I would learn, I would get feedback. So just to rehash, like that's one reason. I always thought that I don't want to be just an iOS engineer. There's value in like knowing about stuff about server side. That's something that I wanted to learn with the book club Swift server side, but I ultimately just didn't pursue it enough. But learning about web development is something that I was always passionate about. I feel like I can start my own business if I ever wanted to with web development, or if there's always great potential for you to be a contractor for people to build them websites. It's a lot more difficult for people to find them a reason to build them an app. Like if I'm a lawyer, I need a website for myself to just market myself. A website would do that. I wouldn't need an app for that. And also I thought, like, just by learning this new technology, I'll just become a better engineer. It'll just give me more, I'll just be better. Yeah, basically. And last but not least, it's just the prestige of it. Like, I say people, like, I'm on Stack Overflow, like, okay. I tell people, like, I have my blog, they're like, really? Oh, wow. Give us a link. Let me see it. How did you do it? So that's partially some of the inception that I was doing. And actually, I wrote down one other note. It was that I did an interview recently recently, it's about December. And in the past 3 years, I've only done like one interview. And I thought I did well. And then at the end of like a week later, I got a generic message, it came down to this, like, you were not able to give enough technical signal. And I took that really personally, Jordan meme. And I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to make my blog and I'm going to show you that I am a technical person. And that was like the major tipping point of like, I'm going to do this blog. And I did it, and now that I've done it, I see it like as a hobby. It's some people like to play soccer. I do too. Some people like to do woodwork. I don't, but this so far, in terms of like content creation and like marketing yourself, and then learning about HTML, CSS, learning about like Google Analytics and the SEO of side of things, which has been a major struggle for me. Like that, those are all the reasons, the challenge and the joy that I've had of doing the blog so far.
You guys, I feel like Mohammad here is shaming us into getting our blogs. Like he's like so ahead of the game here. And you know how this whole thing about a blog, what's funny is that it was the big thing to do like 10 years ago or more. It was like the big thing, and it's still suggested today to do it, and I still don't have a blog that I keep up to date. It's like it's actually I'm really impressed that you're able to do this, and they're not only are they interesting, but it's like on a regular kind of cadence too.
I find it funny how much it was more like an FU to whoever whoever that interviewer, the hire is like, oh, not technical. I was like, have you even listened to this guy? I'm kind of curious in that sense. Like, so that was just one. Was it one out of like a few, or that was
no? Ever since I've joined this Xfinity team, like it's been such a lovely team. It's hard to leave, and I've done just one interview since then. A lot of companies have reached out, but I've just been a bit lazy about it.
It's because you got a blog, man.
The blog has been like it's been joyful. I don't know like if I join like if I join like a, let's say like a Fang like company, would I ever have this luxury of having the time or like this
or even
work life balance,
the ability? Because don't they restrictions on sometimes on what you can do? The big companies.
They do have some restrictions. Like I was listening to another podcast. One of the restrictions is if you're become an Apple employee, you cannot work on your app other than if there's a major OS release that blocks your app. So somebody said, for the period of time that I was working at Apple, I sold my app to somebody with a contract to buy it 2 years later, and I bought it back for $1. And I already told that person like what to do for like do this in the meantime.
That's awesome. That is such a programmer mentality. I'm just like going to find a workaround.
Well, that's a lot of inherent trust to assume that person's going to sell it back in $1 if it becomes successful.
Yeah.
So you started your blog for various reasons, and it's going well. So I guess it's how are you choosing your topics? Right? Is that like how do you like select your is it just things you're working on? Is it just whatever your fancy is that week? Because you seem to, as we said, you have a variety of topics.
It's a lot about things I struggle with. So like just looking up like the posts that I've had, like the very first post that I had was like, why can't Xcode show, or actually that's the protocol, Swift protocol compile time check. And I was writing something and I was like, why does this compile? Why does this other way of writing it not compile? It didn't make sense. I asked it in Slack, and then I got answers for it. And I was like, not a lot of people have talked about this in this clear, concise format. So let me just put it up as a blog post. And that's like one struggle. Like one is like what I struggle with. Sometimes it's just something I just want to deeper dive into. And like, I just go like crazy curious about it. And once I figure it out, once I have this like, I figured it out, I just start writing a post about it. For example, the background task, UI application background task, I felt like the API around that is not clear, as in like typically you have completion handlers where they don't get stored as in like once the work is done, it'll get executed. With UI application background tasks, it's more of like this completion handler gets stored, executed later at a certain time if you hit your timeout, which is not unique. It's unique in the sense of how it's stored. Or sometimes I've just spent too much time on figuring something out. Example, how to read Git documentation. And that was actually like one of the first posts that somebody outside of like CoocaHeads said, "Hey, Mohammed, this is a really good post. I never thought to ask this question, and now I can read like Git documentation with ease."
So I mean, I when I did used to have more of a somewhat of a blog, one of the things I would do was just that if I figured out something, I would post it as much as just for my future self as a reference. Like I remember doing this. I don't think it's up anymore, but I remember like what the heck was that integration with I remember iTunes had like this iTunes like thing where you could put up your own like education materials or something. It was like a long time ago, but you had to build your own login for it and stuff. And there was this weird incompatibility between, I think, how certain things and like dates or the something about the authentication algorithm. Something, there was a difference between how things worked on like the Java side or whatever it was that Apple was using and like the .NET stuff I was using. And I figured out like how to work around it. So I wrote a whole little post about it, and that got some decent traffic for me at the time because it was really useful because I would come back to it and be like, oh right, that's why that thing's broken. So like, I really found that valuable. So
that's
even just for yourself.
Absolutely true. When I a while back, I did a presentation on like the hidden benefits of Stack Overflow at work.
Nice.
And one of the slides that I put up was like, every time I come back to my answer or something, and I come back to them whenever I get an upvote, whenever I get a comment, downvote, an edit suggestion, any of those, it's like looking in the mirror. And oftentimes you're like, wow, this is a really good post. Wow, this is what I wrote here. Okay, I'm not going to forget this. Or sometimes it's like, just like as in a real mirror that you're looking in, you see beauties, and sometimes you see defects. You're like, oh, this is stupid. Oh, this is wrong. Or like, this comment that this person gave to me, like this feedback is extremely valuable, and I should just like adjust my post to make it more clear or correct whatnot. And at the very end, every time that I write something down, like regardless of me coming back to it, it just helps me structure my mind a lot better around that topic that I'm writing it down, because right now I have to write it in a way that not me, but everybody else that reads it understands. I have to like reference documentation. And sometimes I'm trying to like explain something and I realize I don't have exactly the foundational understanding of it. So I have to like dig deeper, ask people like, what about this? What about that? And then I'm able to like put it together. But just as I said, like the first time that it plants the seed in my brain and memory is when I'm writing it. The next time it's when somebody writes like a comment, upvote, whatever. I just go back to it. I look at it again. Occasionally, it's something that I look it up myself, and then I come back to my own answer on Stack Overflow. This has happened before that I've seen a question, I've seen an answer, I've wrote a comment on that question. 2 years later, I come back to the same answer, and I'm finally able to like answer my own comment to that answer.
Nice. So you still use Stack Overflow? You still find it valuable to participate and ask and answer questions there as well as your blog, or are you kind of transitioning away from it?
That's a really good question. So with Stack Overflow, there's context is there already. Somebody has put the time to ask a question, and they're if you answer them, they're willing to come and like leave a comment. Hey, this fixed it. Hey, this didn't fix it. Or once you write your answer, somebody else could come and write a more simpler answer, more elegant answer, and you can learn from that. with my own blog, I find that slightly difficult because, like, how often I don't have a platform exactly for people to come and comment on my blog post. There are some hacks to that. Like, one is to just post about it on Slack communities, post about it in Twitter. One other smart hack that I've learned is just before you publish your blog post, you, at least with Netlify, you have this option of, it gives you a preview. So like if my post is on like mfaani.com/post123, now with this preview, it's going to be like Netlify, some crazy URL /posts/123. And I can share that post with other folks. And once I share that post with other folks, I can get feedback from them and before I publish it. And I feel like before publishing is probably the best time to get feedback, as opposed to publish it and then ask folks to give you feedback. Like, people would be more affectionate towards an unpublished post versus a published post. So that's one area. Like, the context is one area. The search engine optimization with Stack Overflow is just out of the box. With Hugo and my blog post, I have still not figured it out. I've done crazy amount of stuff on like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, on my what's it called, sitemap, and I still haven't been able to like figure it out. I've asked questions about it on Stack Overflow. I've been trying to find myself a Slack group that is on web development. I found Philly Dev, which is not as polished and as organized as like PhillyCocoa, which is why I really value PhillyCocoa. So
we try.
I mean, you can still ask it in PhillyCocoa. There are a lot of people who are actually web developers as their day job.
Yeah.
And they've just hung out with us for like ever. It's kind of,
or they were Apple developers
and
soured on it.
Yeah.
And we could have moved on.
Not naming names.
Yeah.
But
we're open to everybody is what we're saying.
Yes.
And just to give you, go on. So go on.
I think what you're missing in your titles is metaverse, Bitcoin, NFTs, something a little more topical. You know, got to get the latest hotness. You know, some blockchain. Throw a sprinkle of blockchain in there. In fact, you used to do block, comma chain or something like that. You know, just
you're not clickbaiting your headlines enough.
Yeah, just make it more clickbaity.
So what I'm hearing is that you're still finding Stack Overflow valuable because of the comments and the search engine efficiency for finding questions and such. And are you using Stack Overflow? I'm just trying to see, like, if you're giving advice to somebody, like, to start a technical blog, right? And would you also tell them you should also participate in Stack Overflow? Because there was a time where participation in Stack Overflow was highly, highly encouraged, like in the early days of Stack Overflow, and it still is a valuable place. I mean, I still find answers there, but I never found participation in it myself super useful, because I think there's a lot of, you know, as you discovered, there's like a lot of issues sometimes with trying to ask questions. But there was a time where a lot of people were really big on it.
I mean,
and I'm like,
were big on, like,
really big on it too. And so I'm asking, like, for you, in your view, like, how do you mix the two? And do you actively participate in Stack Overflow and asking or answering questions? Like, how do you split up your time between your blog and doing Stack Overflow? And what do you think is the most valuable for somebody who's trying to maybe use this to help their career?
So Stack Overflow is harsh to get in. They have a harsh community for you to get in. Once you're in, there's tremendous respect. And they have realized this issue that it's hard to get in. They've changed their way of how they bring in new engineers. As in, if you ask a question and you're a new member, it's going to be marked as like, this person is a new member. And there's more instructions for people how to communicate, socialize with these people. Having that said, I still see people asking a question and they get nuked because their question was not in a proper format.
Mm-hmm.
And like what I've tried to do every time I see that is like anybody who like left a bad comment or terrible comment, or sometimes it's just like 3 downvotes in like 5 minutes. I've left this comment a few times of like, to those who have downvoted this person has just joined our community yesterday, and we should be more welcoming to this person. That's what I've done. So
right, yeah.
I feel like if you can get in, if people are instructed properly on how to get in, as in don't ask a duplicate question, show that you have done your research in the sense of like link a question that you studied and say why it doesn't answer a question, that just like gives you 10x more chance of your question getting through. A lot of times your question isn't really a new question. It's just like the same question, but just the solution there doesn't work for you. And if you leave a comment on some answer, on some existing answer, the person could just reply back. But the users just want to create a new question, and that just doesn't help them exactly. If you get active on the site and just go above 50 points, then you can just put comments on other questions. And once you do that on other questions or answers, that's really helpful. One other thing that you can do is they have chat rooms. That is not like marketed. A lot of people don't know about that, but chat rooms also exist, and then you can just like ask your questions there as well.
Okay, so you do think it's worthwhile? It just you learn the rules and you can participate better. So it's still worth it, you think, for like developers to try to be an active participant in Stack Overflow, not just like a lurker.
Definitely, I feel like until you haven't reached maybe like 500 points, 1,000 points, don't go and do your blog. The reason, the things that you learn from Stack Overflow is how to explain your question well, how to set up a context well, how to link things, how to have structure of your answer, how to attach images, and how to respond back to people. And based on if you don't get enough feedback, you're not going to realize how to write your own posts. And other than that, like offering edits to people, that's something that is valuable. And if you're new to Stack Overflow, if you offer an edit and your edit gets approved, which on Stack Overflow you need 3 approvals, you'll get 2 points. And you'll basically understand like where somebody is making a mistake. That also helped me. And for a lot of folks in PhillyCocoa Heads, like English is their first language, but for people that English is they're not their first language, it's like whatever recommendation I have, it's more of a recommendation for them, because with Stack Overflow you have this opportunity of like even rehearsing a bit of your English and how you write things. Like people will correct your English and grammatical errors as well.
Nice. So you finding Stack Overflow is a great training ground for you to learn how to write a better technical blog, is what it sounds like. That's an interesting perspective. I don't think I've ever heard that before about Stack Overflow. It's usually in my mind always like, it's either this place that people put all their attention into, or it's like this awful place of mean people. It's like
I'm always like I always am the lurker type. So
me too.
Like I'll look for the answer to a question that I have, but I'll never ask a question just out of like it's really one of those weird, like, out of respect, quote unquote, of people's time, right? Like, it's like, okay, maybe I'm not thinking about this problem well, so maybe it's me kind of situation. And I don't want to like trouble people, quote unquote, with asking this, somewhat very specific question.
You're being too nice. Like, I'm telling you, people, they love answering questions. Like every time I get a upvote, it just makes me happy. The pointing mechanism of Stack Overflow, it's been really helpful for its success. And it's not that if you post a question, I know the answer A to Z. I will have to struggle. I will learn during that struggle, and that's what that's why it's more of a game. It's not just like answering somebody's question. It's gamified in a sense.
So I guess we're getting close to time, but I want to get a sense of what's next for you, Mohammed. What are you thinking about in terms of like beyond just you started the Stack Overflow, you have a great career, you got your tech blog. What's next? What are you thinking about big picture? Do you want to do like conference presentations? Do you want to expand there? Do you want to do your own YouTube channel? You want to get that like good content money? You want to do a TikTok? Actually, that'd be kind of cool. Just like, this is why this thing works, and you do a little dance and you do presentations, and kids will love it.
Well, definitely since I've purchased the house, like financially, it's been tough.
Mm-hmm.
The mortgage and all, I'm doing a 50-year loan, so that's that. But in terms of like monetization, I haven't had any thoughts on it. I've to be honest, like it just went through my mind of like doing TikTok for like end users, but I've never like got really into the thought. It's something that I have to like put a lot more thought into, like how it could be successful. I've seen people like post on like, did you know you could like put your AirPods down and like eavesdrop on somebody else? Mm-hmm. And then there's like 500,000 likes on that. I was like, wow, really? I wanted to actually do this blog last year around this time, and I just couldn't get it out enough time. And I ultimately got it out in December. And just to go on a tangent here for everybody, setting up a blog is like crazy easy with Netlify. Like you can set up a blog in under 10 minutes. And with Hugo specifically, the difference between Hugo and like a bunch of other static site generators, SSGs, is that with Hugo, it's just a single package you download with Brew, and that's it. If it's like Jekyll or like Gatsby, like there's a dependency of like NPM, which just makes it more tricky. So with Hugo, like there's this quick start blog. It's just like literally 6 commands, and you can have your first post up. And combining that with Netlify, literally in 10 minutes, you can have your first blog post up. So, and I'm available on this Slack or on Twitter if you want to follow up on that, on how to like get your blog up. That's one thing. But the things that I have in mind for like, in terms of like next step would be, one is I was saying like I wanted to do this for last year before WWDC. So this, like my plan was to like do blog posts related to WWDC. Mm-hmm. So this year I'm planning on doing that. I already asked around like what are the prerequisites of doing that, and basically it comes down to having the beta Xcode installed, which doesn't require necessarily for you to like to be on a beta macOS. That's the current macOS should be fine. Then you would definitely need a iOS phone that has like a beta version on it installed, which that's tricky. Like you need a profile and stuff. I've never done that. Once you do that, you got to watch the WWDC video, and then you got to like communicate with folks on Twitter, on Slack, to like polish your posts, like get answers to some of the nuances. Somebody told me that you could also do a lab session, and I heard from folks that contrary to how jam-packed WWDC is when it was like in person for the lab sessions, the online sessions, like there was like literally nobody there. And somebody told me he was able to like book 13 sessions.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you do a blog post based upon some problem that you discussed in a lab session, I've seen that. And I don't remember the details. There was some blog post, and it was super valuable for me because it was a person who had gone to WWDC and had done a lab session, and he had a very similar, not the same kind of problem I was having. Then he wrote about the answer that he got, and it's like literally the only place I found the internet was this, because the solution was only found in this discussion that he had with this engineer. So you can find a lot of extremely valuable insights and content from those interactions, and then you could write your blog posts about it and have a series of them, and they could become big, very useful for you in the future, and as well as for other people. So I like that a lot. I like the idea of doing WWDC specific posts. I mean, there's a bunch of people do that. at WWDC time. It's a great way to focus and learn some stuff during that initial week or 2-week period. And yeah, I think it's a great idea. And then a post about how to set up Hugo plus Netlify and stuff. You said you didn't do that, or you were planning on it?
I am planning on doing that, but I was saying, like, if anybody also needs help, like, I could just reach out. Like, I'm more than happy to.
Where can people reach out to you, Mohammad?
Well, PhillyCocoa, I'm always there. But on Twitter, I go with the same username. I'm also on GitHub, and just on another tangent, like GitHub, I've turned it. Ever since I've done this blog, like, I've went from like 5 repositories to like 25 repositories that I own. It's been like everything now I have, I just dump it into like GitHub, every note, and I have like a repository on like the Hugo things that I've learned, but it's just a repository. So
just for context, your username is at mfaani, FAANI.com. Sorry, that's your website. But username is at mfaani.
Yes. Thank
for
you
all the links.
Yes. The idiot me doesn't know that I should spell that out because, yeah.
Well, we'll get the spelling and everything, and we'll put the links in the show notes.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Just a little side tangent, if you don't mind. We have to not get paid by our non-sponsor.
Yeah. Remember, this is the podcast is currently not sponsored by anybody.
Yes,
and so we have a confusingly named "not a sponsor" segment.
So today's not a sponsor segment is our good friend Joe Czaplinski again, with his other app, Recaf, effortless caffeine tracking, for iOS and watchOS. Many apps record caffeine, but most never learn about you and your habits. What if your caffeine tracker were smarter? That's the pitch. It's a wonderful app that I haven't used because it uses subscription.
Oh man, don't say that.
He's not a sponsor, so it doesn't matter.
That's true.
So it is recap.app is where you can find links to download this app.
Again, we'll put in the show notes so you don't have to try to figure out the spelling.
Once again, thank you, Joe Czaplinski, for being a not a sponsor.
Yeah, he's going to be surprised.
Okay, but thank you, Mohammad, for joining us today. Do you have any last words or words of wisdom or advice for any aspiring developers who are listening to this?
No, I really appreciate for having me here. I've been honored to just be part of CoocaHeads. I couldn't get to this point of my career without the help that I got from this community, and just like, if words of advice, like, I would just say, like, the software engineer community is always helpful to look after like new engineers. Slack is one of the best ways. Stack Overflow is another way. Just try to get yourself into one of these communities, and just from there, like, you can kickstart your career, and learning and knowledge and all that.
Cool. Well, that's all we have for today. You can learn more. Yeah, you can learn more about PhillyCocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack, Meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing: if debugging is the process of removing software bugs, then programming must be the process of putting them in. It's a quote from Exer W. Deichter. Anyway, till next time, good luck with your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always. And why can't we have like the Bob Ross of programming? Well, okay, Paul Hudson counts.